Statement of Alexander Rybnik, March 15th, 1937. It wasn't about fame or fortune. It wasn't about making history or to stand on the shoulders of giants. It was about knowledge and truth. I needed to know what happened to my grandfather. I needed to know what he discovered. I needed to see what he saw with his own eyes and come to an understanding. The mundanity and pointlessness of life finally sent me on my way. My friend, Captain Peasley, would take me on my quest. We traversed the ocean on the captain's fishing trawler, the Southern Cruise. We were to make landfall at Cooktown, a coastal town in the Shire of Cook, Queensland, Australia. Before he died, my grandfather was a university lecturer who taught archaeology. I followed in his footsteps. In his will, he left me a key to a safety deposit box at his bank. To my surprise, the box contained several books on the occult and mysticism, numerous maps. But the most significant items in the box were a pair of sketches and a curious black stone with a face of sorts carved into it. In my grandfather's letter, he stated that the drawings were inspired by strange dreams that had been plaguing him. I examined the sketches. A subterranean cavern of immense height was meticulously drawn on paper with black pencil. The centerpiece of this sketch were 2 rows of standing stones that ran parallel to one another. They were built from massive cyclopean rocks that were stacked in such a way that was reminiscent of Stonehenge. The image evoked fleeting thoughts of eldritch terror. Written on the back side of the drawing, the gateway to the other side resides within the mountain. The second drawing was even more bizarre. I got the distinct impression that it was a cold and arid desert at night. The ground was fissured and littered with fields of mummified human remains. The focus of this image, however, was that of an enormous plateau which stood menacingly. On the surface of the plateau was also a collection of standing stones, similar to the first. An indistinct shape stood on the edge of the plateau. An animal, I think. Written on the opposite side of the paper was a message. The fabled plateau of Ling. Each and every single one of us will face this. It is inevitable. The stone carving came from a time when we knew very little and feared the primal world. A modern mind would find it difficult to visualize the world through the eyes of an ancient man. The face on the stone, however, instilled an instinctive fear of the dark. My destination was a site held sacred by Australian Indigenous people, where humans feel unwanted, where they vanish without a trace. A place that is rugged and foreboding, clouded in mystery and immersed in superstition. Black Mountain. The Indigenous folks refer to it as the Mountain of Death. Tunnels and caves honeycomb the area. The only living things on that mountain are giant spiders, pythons and taipans. Thousands upon thousands of gigantic boulders strewn across the landscape make up the mountain, a treacherous barren waste. Scientists have offered theories behind the origin of this peculiar mountain. a volcanic eruption, an upheaval during the Ice Age, an asteroid impact site. But none of these possibilities seemed satisfactory. I stood at the bow of the ship, gazing at the continent that loomed on the horizon. My guide, Tommy, approached. "I think you're mad as a bag of ferrets." "Tell me a tale," I said. Tommy leaned on the railing next to me. "My people have many beliefs on how the mountain came to be." "Go on," I said, as I withdrew a pack of cigarettes from my shirt pocket. I offered Tommy a cigarette, but he declined. I lit it up as he began. "One such legend says, in the time of the dreaming, the time when the legends were born, there was a beautiful young woman whose skin shone like obsidian. 2 brothers were smitten by the woman. Both were determined to win her heart. Our attention was directed upwards, towards the heavens. A faint ghostly band of red light materialized in the pre-dawn sky directly above us. It was the Aurora Australis, the so-called Southern Lights." Tommy continued sharing his tale. "To settle their differences, each brother set about to build a mountain of boulders. The brother with the highest mound would take the woman. Day after day, the brothers worked. Their piles of boulders grew taller and taller." Tommy paused, focusing on the aurora. The glowing ribbons of red light spread across the dark sky as it brightened with intensity. The rippling lights continued to dance across the backdrop of luminous stars. Before the contest could be decided, a wild storm descended on the land. Boulders tumbled down, crushed both the brothers. The woman died too. "So, you believe it's haunted?" "They say her cries can be heard throughout the canyons and caves of the mountains. The place is cursed. At dusk, the evil of the place begins to reveal itself. You can hear it on the wind that blows in the endless caverns that run deep in the earth. It's a moaning wind, lures unsuspecting people to their doom." I grabbed my kit bag and withdrew the black stone with the carving on it. I presented it to Tommy. "My grandfather found this in the mountain. Does it look familiar to you?" Tommy stared at the stone a good while. He traced a finger over the lines that formed the face. "No, doesn't look like anything I've ever seen. You say you found it in the mountain?" "Yeah, in a subterranean chamber. It's very strange." Shortly afterwards, we docked at a fisherman's wharf just outside of Cooktown. I booked a room at a nearby inn. Peasley would stay with the ship. During the day, we would go into town and stock up on supplies. While I was chatting with the innkeep, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. A person sitting on a bench directly across the inn. Underneath a street lamp was an elderly tribal man. He had a very distinct look that is seared into my memory. He had winter white hair and a beard that was long and unkempt. He was wearing a dusty old suit, which seemed to be slightly frayed. I think the most unsettling thing about him was his gaze. I wrote him off as a drunkard before checking in. Before departing to my room, I took one more glance at the old man, only to see that he was gone. After such a long voyage, sleep came easily. The following day, I sat down with one of the tribal elders at a local pub. I enjoyed a pleasant conversation over a drink and food. He explained a belief among his people in the area. The mountain is of important significance to the tribe. Kakajaka is what we call it, the place of spears. The elder paused to take a sip of his drink. His eyes scanned the room. He seemed suspicious of something. The mountain originated in the Dreamtime with an evil medicine man who convened with wicked spirits from beyond. A young chief confronted him about this and was murdered by the medicine man. He leaned in, lowered his voice. Things didn't stop there. That cruel medicine man went on to devour the flesh of the chief, drank his blood. The tribe became aware of this and chased the man out with burning vengeance in their hearts. He fled to the mountain, where he was then struck by a cleansing bolt of lightning. His body exploded, and in turn, charred the surrounding rocks. The elder stopped again. I could see his eyes focused on someone behind me. He focused on me again, and continued. It is a place that demands respect, but the white man has often disregarded the legends. In 1877, a courier was horseback riding, searching for a stray calf when he, the horse, and the calf all vanished. Several years later, a constable was hot on the heels of a wanted man. He was tracking the criminal through the brush at the base of Black Mountain. They both vanished into thin air. Other trackers followed the trail to a cave entrance but came up empty-handed. Despite the unrelenting heat, I could feel a chill course through my body, like someone had walked over my grave. The elder saw me shiver. A grim look formed on his face. Those disappearances have been happening ever since. Nearby cattle ranchers and their herds have gone without trace. Gold prospectors and cave explorers, they've all inexplicably disappeared into the ether. Human remains have been found in the vicinity of the mountain, their bodies cut to ribbons. But the most shocking thing about these grisly finds is that each of the individuals have had their skulls cracked open, their brains removed, maybe eaten. The elder paused when he saw the colour drain from my face. My grandfather was killed by someone in a very similar fashion while he was seeking treatment in Canberra. There are many predatory animals in Australia, but none of them are known to have these peculiar habits. Rumours of a killer stalking the countryside run rampant. The police have been working overtime on this. My heart sank to my stomach. What about this phantom cat that I've heard about? The elder took another long sip from his drink before continuing. There have been rumblings of a large mysterious black cat that's been sighted on the mountain. Maybe a relative of a prehistoric species. That is an especially curious claim. There are no big cats on the continent. Domestic cats were introduced, but none that live in the wilderness. Another pause between the two of us. We were both scanning the room. I think I could confidently say we both felt like something was wrong. A shift in the conversation. I showed the black stone to the elder, as well as the drawings created by my grandfather. He examined each one carefully and shook his head. A look of worry formed on his face. "How did your grandfather die?" the elder asked. "He was murdered." "My condolences." "May I ask, how was he?" before he died. He looked like a man who was pursued. He was always looking over his shoulder, shut himself away from the world. The elder let out a sigh. Maybe he saw things he shouldn't have. Maybe he took things that he shouldn't have touched. There was a long silence between the two of us as we looked down at our drinks. We were both pondering things. I happened to glance up and briefly caught sight of an old tribal man with a striking white beard and wild hair. He was dressed in a disheveled suit that looked like it came from another period. He was fixated on me. Slowly, he raised a hand and pointed a finger directly at me. I blinked, and just like that, the man was gone. The tribal elder broke the silence. Maybe it'd be best to return the stone back to its rightful place. I spent some time at the local library. I'm not sure what to make of this. Excerpts from a doomed expedition. In 1850, a French explorer, Axel Guillemot, set out to explore Black Mountain. The expedition consisted of 4 other Europeans, 2 Aboriginal guides, and 7 horses. They were never seen or heard from again. Only the remains of one of the guides was discovered. Their camp was found at the base of the mountain. It is believed they perished on the mountain. Subsequent search parties turned up nothing. There are photographs of each member of the expedition. The photographs were taken at a local church in Cooktown. One photograph in particular has put a strain on my nerves. It is of one of the guides, an old man with a head of white hair and a great beard. He was wearing a dark frock coat over light trousers and low-heeled shoes. The name under the photograph: Clifford Bombat. Not much is known of his youth, but his skills in tracking and knowledge of Aboriginal languages suggest a traditional upbringing. His skills in horse riding and marksmanship indicated extensive contact with colonial culture. He was serving as a native assistant in the police force at Cooktown, where his tasks were to assist in the tracking of escaped convicts who were wanted by the authorities. He had a reputation as a superb tracker and a reliable and useful member of any travelling party. The mutilated remains of Clifford Bombat were discovered on the outskirts of their camp. Possible animal attack. The most significant wound was on his head. The trek through the eucalyptus trees was long and arduous. A thick fog bank swallowed the landscape. It suffocated the environment in its omnipresence. The looming mountain was a ghostly silhouette in the thick white veil. Fortunately, we were not far from the base of the mountain when the worst of it arrived. Maybe it was my imagination, but I could have sworn I saw a spectral shape moving in the fog. A feeling of dread began to squeeze my heart. "I don't think we're alone," I whispered to Tommy. "I know." Tommy reached into his rucksack and withdrew a pistol. He looked over at me. "You know how to use firearms?" I nodded. Tommy handed the gun over to me and withdrew a second handgun. He stuck it in his belt. "Huge pythons live in that mountain, big enough to swallow a fully grown roo." Tommy and I set up camp in a small clearing, surrounded by tall grass. We would wait for the fog to dissipate before moving on. In the meantime, we examined my grandfather's maps. It was unusually quiet. The surrounding area was completely mute, save for the sound of a gentle breeze. I could not help but feel eyes on both of us. I dreamed that night. I was standing in a dark hallway at night. My grandfather's home in Poland. At the end of the hall was a door that was partially open. A dim, orange light seeped through the minute openings. I approached the door with great trepidation in my heart. I summoned whatever courage I had and nudged the door open. A slow, painful creak as the door gently swung open. It was my grandfather's study. A lone figure stood at the desk. It was my grandfather. A look of sorrow and regret was etched onto his face. He reached into the desk and withdrew that black stone. He held it in a hand, extending his arm towards me. His lips were moving, as though he was speaking, but no words were coming out. Something materialized behind my grandfather. An apparition. It was Clifford Bombat. His gaze was piercing my soul. Then something happened. His form began to change. He fell to the floor, a thrashing mass of shadows. A giant cat emerged from the darkness. Its coat was inky black that refused to reflect any light. The beast was unlike any cat species that I was familiar with. I could say its sleek body shape was similar to that of a cheetah, but its head was shaped like that of a jaguar with powerful jaws. I think its eyes were the worst. Both pupils were completely dilated. They were both ringed by luminescent irises that gave off a white light. They reminded me of a solar eclipse at totality. It bared its teeth, revealing rows of sharp teeth that dripped with saliva. A low rumbling growl sounded from its throat. Its jaws unhinged, and something erupted from its maw. Serpent. Tentacle. It was a muscular appendage that extruded towards me. It was the cat's esophagus, and its stomach turned inside out. At the end of the gut sac was a bony lance of sorts. It punctured my skull, and I collapsed to the floor. Several smaller tendrils emerged from the beast's throat and lashed out towards me. They entered the bleeding gash in my skull and began to pry it open. The room went black. I awoke to a late-night thunderstorm. I was gripping the stone with a face carved onto it. It was a tough scramble up the mound of gigantic black boulders that formed Black Mountain. We had the benefit of my grandfather's maps that showed us the path to take. He was very meticulous about detailing the locations. The cave entrance was on the summit of the mountain. In order to access it, we had to get down on our bellies and push all the air out of our lungs in order to squeeze through a narrow gap. Once we got through the squeeze, we were able to stand upright. Next was a downward sloping tunnel. The sunlight lessened in here, so we readied our electric torches. The further we traversed the tunnel, the darker it became. At the end of the passage was a drop straight down. Tommy grabbed climbing ropes from his rucksack and secured them, which would allow us to climb down the shaft. And then it happened. Heavy footfalls sounded behind us. A black silhouette knocked Tommy face first against a cavern wall. In the light from my electric torch, a massive feline form was revealed. It swiped its claws at me, just inches from my midsection. I could see pure animal rage in its eyes. It let out an ear-deafening roar that ripped through the passages. It was the phantom cat from my dream. But this was no dream. This was real. In a desperate panic, I withdrew the pistol from my kit bag and I fired several times at the beast. The tunnel lit up from each shot. The deafening rounds punched holes into its hide. But the cat did not even flinch. A guttural rumble sounded from deep within its throat. The cat opened its mouth, showing off rows of razor-sharp teeth. A muscular and flexible protuberance emerged from its throat. Just like in my dream. It was the animal's stomach and esophagus turning inside out, forming into a tentacle of sorts. A bony claw protruded from the very tip of the tentacle. It then reeled back like a snake, getting ready to strike. It launched towards me and struck the ground just inches from my feet. It did this several times, forcing me backwards each time. I kept backing up in complete and utter terror until I found myself falling. Darkness. When I came to, I found myself at the bottom of the shaft. I was in a state of shock, agony, despair, horror. I detected movement coming from up above me. I grabbed my electric torch, which survived the fall, and I shone it upwards. A face was peering down at me. My grandfather. I cried out. I painfully retreated into the dark passage behind me. My heart noisily beat against my rib cage, and my lungs felt like they were on fire. I came to a complete stop at the end of the passage. My mind was trying to process everything that had happened. Primordial masonry stood in front of me. A wall composed of cyclopean stones. Perhaps it was a structure built by the ancients. It had to be. Oddly enough, A single block was missing. It was a way through. I squeezed through, silently praying that the whole thing would not collapse on me. Clumsily, I emerged into a chamber beyond the cyclopean wall. Spikes of pain shot through my back, reminding me of my great fall, and I gasped in pain. My gasp had drawn the attention of something. Something big. Something hungry. The sound of something dragging through the loose rocks on the chamber floor. Something massive slithered towards me. A cylindrical, limbless body moved into my light. Glistening scales. An arrow-shaped head. 2 yellow eyes fixed on me. A large, fanged mouth. It was a giant python moving towards me. I raised the pistol and I fired twice into its head, putting it down instantly. The recoil made my hands feel numb. I instinctively turned around and I saw a shadowy figure standing back at the cyclopean wall. Shakily, I pointed the pistol and torch at the apparition. To my dismay, the shape seemingly consumed the light. By this point, I was well into the other side of madness, a descent into the inferno. Tears welled up in my eyes. My heart was overworking itself now. In the dead silence of the nameless ruins, I could hear hell's churn in my ears. My breath was stolen. I fled. After ploughing through an untold distance, I found myself standing in an enormous cavern. The lights of the chamber were further away than any human eye could see. The inky darkness proved impenetrable from my flimsy torch. I halted my mad dash. It was freezing cold down here, a stark contrast to the surface climate. I could see the vapors of my breath in the light, and my teeth began to chatter as I began to shiver. 2 rows of gigantic standing stones towered over me. It was a prehistoric monument of nebulous origin. It was much larger than Stonehenge. These were the ruins that my grandfather had sketched on paper. I gazed up at the monoliths. Each of them had unidentifiable glyphs etched onto them. What they were supposed to represent remains unknown. Horrible suggestions and primordial fear is what came to mind. A curious altar between the first 2 monoliths caught my attention. Dark stains discolored the top with rivulets on the sides. Movement behind me. I turned around, only to come face to face with my grandfather. I found myself being lifted up off the ground. I kicked and thrashed helplessly. Next, I found myself being flung towards the altar. I landed on my back, having the wind knocked out of me a second time. Groggily, I got up, and I saw my grandfather pointing at me. By now, the twilight mist became waist-high, and the temperature in the cavern continued to drop. I realized my grandfather wasn't pointing at me, but at the altar behind me. I knew what had to be done. Nervously, I reached a hand into my kit bag, and I pulled out the black stone with a face carved onto it. Gently, I placed the rock onto the altar. I felt an electrical sensation travel all throughout my body. There was a smell in the air, like that of a thunderstorm. The mist began to dissipate, and the temperature began to warm up. A loud eruption startled me. Everything went black. I remember flashes of consciousness, dark passages and cave tunnels, the sensation of being dragged, and a voice. Tommy's voice. "You're gonna be okay, mate. Just a bit further." I looked up and saw Tommy's face. But there was something different about him. His eyes. They reminded me of a solar eclipse. I lost consciousness then. When I finally came to, I found myself in the Cooktown Hospital. I know the truth about Black Mountain. I know about the dark and forbidden secrets that are hidden within. I put things right and re-established balance. I think I've been forgiven. However, the mountain of death, the place of the spear, will forever remain in my dreams.